Okay. Hi, everyone. My name is Ainsley Keller. I manage our sales and operations for SK Global North America. Thanks again for joining us. If you have been part of our webinar series, we're just so grateful that you're spending a chunk of your day with us. And Chuck Schrader's on the line. Chuck, can you introduce yourself for me?
Hi there, this is Chuck Schrader. I am a senior solution architect with SK Global.
Thanks, Chuck. So we're in July 30th, man. We're starting to come to the end of the summer webinar series, but I'm in Northeast Ohio and Chuck's in Ohio as well. We're going to let this summer linger as long as possible. So we're going to call this the summer webinar series for as long as we can. Let me see if I can click my slides. There we go. So if you've been a part of this series, you know that you've been coming almost every week. We kicked off the summer webinar series May 14th with an overview of AP automation. And we've just been toggling back and forth between the AR folks, the AP folks. We spent some time on bank rec, and today we're talking about credit card reconciliation. We are going to continue this webinar series through August and September because many of our partners and customers and those of you who attended are not sick of our voices yet. So we're going to keep showing up if you're going to keep coming. So today on July 30th, we're going to cover credit card reconciliation. I put the past events up here on the screen. If anybody is kind of new to the webinar series and you want a recording of any of these past events, just send us an email to sales@sksoft.com, or you can go to sksoft.com/events, and you can see the past events and register for a copy of the recording. I'm going to kind of click through this. We do have an event schedule for August and September, so these are kind of the save the dates. Early next week, we will have all of these loaded to the events page. So we're going to feature some partners that are very well known in the Microsoft channel, one of them being FlintFox for their TRM solution. And then in September, we're going to talk to the folks at Elevate HR that most of you probably know who those guys are. We're going to feature their solution as part of our webinar series. But the rest of the series will continue to be about our AP automation products, credit card processing, cash application, and how we integrate with banks, all of the stuff that you know us and love us for. I have one more slide, and then we're going to jump into credit card reconciliation and give Chuck time, and then we'll always have time for questions at the end. You guys have been so kind in making this a collaborative event and a discussion. Please use the bottom of the Zoom session to post questions, send us a chat message. We haven't really had time to get to all the questions in the sessions, but post them and we will be sure to get back to you. And then usually somebody always asks me if this is being recorded, and yes, the session's being recorded, and you can get you'll get a copy of the recording automatically for showing up today. If you don't know who we are, SK Global Software is a global strategic ISV. We have been in business for over 25 years. Our founders are still an active part of our organization today. And we are known in the channel and have grown a reputation for providing banking, treasury, and payments automation in the Dynamics space. So we've got customers running Dynamics SL or Solomon if you've been in the channel for a long time. We have customers running AX 2012. And of course, we've invested time and money in the latest version, which is Microsoft D365 for finance and operations. And the credit card reconciliation product that we're going to show you today, Chuck is going to be presenting that in D365 F&O. It was released a little bit ago, so if you're on a latest version of SKG, you can turn that on. It is not available on AX 2012. Am I remembering that correctly, Chuck? Keep me honest.
Correct.
Okay. We sell our solution through all of the top tier Microsoft partners. Some of you are probably on the line with us, so thanks for joining today. And we have over 1,600 customers using some slice of our banking suite or AP automation. Everything that we've presented throughout the summer webinar series is published on AppSource. It's certified and compatible with the latest version. We are very proud of that. And we actually were just recognized for the 4th year in a row as being Inner Circle partners, which represents the top 1% of partners. We are we're really grateful to our team for helping us get there another year in a row. So very proud of that. And thanks to all of the existing customers and partners that are on the line for helping us get that achievement. And that's it for my spiel and PowerPoint slides. Chuck, I'm going to stop sharing and we're going to get into the good stuff now. Chuck, let me know when you have your screen up and I'll make sure we can see it.
Okay, trying to present here. Yep. Share. See Excel spreadsheet?
I see the Excel spreadsheet. Yes, sir, I do.
Okay. So whenever we get involved with a credit card recon type of project or in an implementation, we talk about it as part process and part product. Of course, the process is kind of just how you set things up to make recon as easy as possible, and the product part is the features we have in our treasury automation suite to again make this process as automated as possible. So the process part is kind of what I'm showing on the screen now. When you set up, whether it's credit card authorization, our product, or if you have an integration coming in, one of the first things that we need to figure out is how do we record these credit card payments in the first place? What's that offset account? A lot of times I see well, someone will set it up to Ledger, but Ledger just doesn't lend itself very nicely to the normal kind of reconciliation process. So what we do is we set up a bank account. So this is a cash and bank account, and we tie it, instead of tying it to cash, we tie it to credit card clearing, and we would record payments against that account. So the original payments is not directly hitting cash right away. We really don't want to affect cash until we get our deposit in from our merchant providers. So we want to get we want to kind of show these in some kind of an in-process account before that point. So we'll set up a regular cash and bank account, but not tie it to cash, tie it to again, some kind of a credit card clearing sort of account. So typically throughout the day or throughout the process or integration, these payments are getting recorded in this credit card bank account. So what we are typically working with then to reconcile this, well, I should put this as well. So, and when you get a deposit in, it's going to occur in your actual bank account, of course. And in our normal bank rec process, we would set up a rule that the offset to this deposit would be to this same credit card clearing account. So basically, this account's being swept, or not swept, but the being swept out and kind of put into a real deposit. So if this is recorded automatically, then this entry is being made automatically as well. In a daily basis, typically you're getting in a statement, or you can get a statement from your gateway. What we typically see a statement look like is something like this. So we usually try to get the most data dump sort of, if you will, data dump sort of looking format as possible, because these read in very nicely. So you can see I kind of got my columns numbered across the top so I could set up my map more easily. Also, like when your payments come in, another thing I guess I should have pointed out there, when your payments come in, we want to put something in that payment reference that the credit card statement's going to know about. Typically, the easiest thing is that at credit card payment time, an authorization number or a transaction ID that is almost always going to come in on your statement. So if you know that information, put it in the payment reference field of the payment you record. And then when we map this in, and you'll see how we map that in a minute, then we can read that transaction ID and map to the credit card transaction. So the statement comes in looking like this. The thing that you'll notice about this versus sort of a bank rec type of statement is it's kind of unbalanced, right? So we only have the charges come in. If we do have a total, a lot of times it will be kind of not in line with the rest of the transactions. It won't be the way you'd kind of like a bank rec to come in. So what we really like it to do is look something like this, where these fees get added up and kind of make a separate line, and this deposit adds up and makes a separate line as well. In this case, I'm showing a net deposit. If you have a gross deposit, then basically this fee line wouldn't be here. But again, what you're normally getting is something that looks like this, and we'll try to map that transaction ID to match to a payment reference. So back to this, when we read this statement in, so if we, again, kind of make it look like that line I just showed, what we'd like to do is read these in, of course, check these off. If in this case, we're doing a net deposit, so we record the fee as well. And with our automation on the credit card rec process, we can record this fee. And then this deposit would typically be matched to something that came from the cash account. Technically, we could kind of map it either way. We could map the credit card reconciliation to kind of push the deposit over, or we could have the deposit push the credit card recon offset over. I typically recommend to set it up this way. After all, this is what actually did hit your cash account. So if there is any discrepancy, I'd rather cash be reflected correctly and that the discrepancy is sorted out over here in a clearing account. But again, your cash is correct. So if we kind of translate this process to the forms and the process inside of D365. So we have credit card reconciliation file formats. So when we set up the file formats, if you're familiar with our bank rec product, you'll notice it looks a lot the same. One of the options though that aren't in the bank rec formats is this credit card rec options. So we can generate these fee lines. In this case, I have a fee line that is mapped, so I'm reading in that fee amount column from that example I just showed. Back up here, so I'm adding up that fee column and then I'm generating an extra, oops, wrong screen. I'm generating an extra fee line with this process. This is generate this fee. So same thing with the deposit, I'm generating the deposit. And on this one, I have this flip the sign because some banks report fee, or some providers will report fees positive, but because they're in a fee column, you know they're really kind of a negative entry there. So we assign these a transaction type, we assign them a description. And again, the point of this is that we want this statement to not look like this. We want to kind of generate these couple lines on the bottom automatically. Because we assign them a transaction type to each of these lines, when we import it in, we can act on those transaction types. So in the case of fees, we can have it set to, it goes through a default mapping rule, which in turn looks at the main account associated with the fee to automatically create the account. In my case, we had a couple extra items here for, there was different ones we had tested out, but if you have, I saw like network costs come in as separate lines, or processing fees can sometimes come in as separate lines. Again, we can, because they're coming in and we're mapping that to a transaction type, we can set up these to do any type of mapping we want. On the credit card matching itself, again, typically we would try to encourage to get a payment reference item that is a transaction, an authorization ID, so that we can match to it. We'll import that same field from the statement and try to match to that payment reference. By default, like in the sales order process in D365, the credit card authorization does become the payment reference. So sales order kind of naturally works that way. In our credit card authorization, our credit card advantage product, we do the same thing in payment journal as well. And again, if there's an integration coming in, we'd want to do that in the integration as well. The in this case, I have a second date and amount. A lot of times we see like when customers have especially high volume credit cards, you get a lot of duplicates. So it would be, very common that there's only a reference sum and amount match, and we don't have a date and amount type of match on the normal charges coming in, because we really don't want to find a bunch of duplicates by matching on that. If we bring in the payment reference field correctly as an authorization number, reference sum and amount should give us typically a very, very, very high match. So we'll back out of here, the credit card maintenance here. So I think one more screen. So on the field layout, as I mentioned, transaction type, we want to map one of these fields to transaction type. On the gateway statement, in this case, I just mapped this field to transaction type, so the express checkout. And then whenever we kind of add these pseudo lines at the bottom, again, these are kind of virtual lines that get added upon import, then these kind of fall in that same virtual column. So I'm getting the transaction type out of that column. And again, I got the fee mapped so that I can add that fee and generate that extra line at the bottom as well. As I mentioned on the payment reference, in this case, I'm mapping that origin ID in, so it's coming in. So I'm mapping this field in as the this transaction ID in as the payment, as a bank reference, so I can match that to the payment reference. So when this comes in, then again, if you're familiar with our normal kind of bank rec process, let me get this out of the way. If you're familiar with our normal bank rec process, we have a process credit card statements. This works a lot like the bank rec process. So we expect it to come in, we'd expect the charges to have a very, very high match rate. Again, especially if we're doing an authorization number type of match. We'd expect to create entries for fees, and again, expect to create a match for the deposit. Typically, this match is going to be, the credit card statement is going to be ahead of the actual deposit. So this might have to wait a little bit for the deposit to catch up to match to, but we can always come in here and click, match transactions or match all to kind of catch that process back up. So back to this kind of diagram up front here. So we start with the statement, we add these virtual lines. These we expect to match automatically. These we expect to create a fee, and these we expect to do a transfer to match to a deposit that got entered at your normal bank account. I know that in the one voucher setting, that if you have the one voucher setting off, you cannot do an entry like I show here. So you cannot do a bank to bank entry. In that case, we just set up a rule for this to dump it into a temporary account, and for this to pull it back out of that temporary account and put it in this transaction. So again, any sort of interim account or clearing account to kind of move that transaction. So if you're familiar with our bank rec process, a lot of this should look very familiar. If you're not familiar, hopefully we covered enough to show what the process looks like. But again, part process, part product, just to make sure that we can get as high an automation as possible, and hopefully eliminate a lot of the headaches of reconciling credit cards. One of the common questions is, hey, what if this deposit doesn't match? So a lot of times there's a rounding, I call it rounding, I guess a timing issue is probably a better word, from one night to the other. So my deposit is a transaction occasionally kind of falls on a different day than what the statement would report it. So I get my deposit and my statement a little bit off. We do have in the transaction reconciliation screen, we have a split transaction. So we could split that deposit transaction to be able to properly match it to the right day if there's days where that does not match up properly. The idea again is to try to make that match, as many times as possible by, getting your cutoffs right. If you try to cut off at a time that is not a busy time for credit card acceptance. Hopefully that timing error occurs less often, but I know that we've had multiple clients talk about that timing issue can occur. Again, we can then kind of split the deposit to match to the appropriate day if we need to. So if we have part of this transaction moves to tomorrow, I can split it off, and then tomorrow I might have to select, you know, today's deposit plus yesterday's deposit to make the two match. So that's kind of the credit card process. I know this is a little shorter topic than a lot of our others, but Ainsley, I don't know if we kind of racked up any questions there while we were talking.
Sure did. Yep. There's a question from April. It's actually in the panelist chat. I just want to make sure that that her needs are met.
Panelist chat.
Yeah, in the middle of your screen, there should be she might have gotten the question answer, but it's a little bit hard for me to understand.
Are those lines, the fee and total, added by code between the receipt of the statement and the import? Is that the question, Ainsley? Yep.
Yeah, and then she said for D365, says this part of the SKG process to create the lines.
Yeah, so when you get a statement like this, then those options on the screen is to make it look really like this. So we don't physically go out and adjust the file. We just add those lines automatically on the way in. So if we go to the process bank screen, this line and this line were added. They were not on the original statement like the rest of these.
Oh, Deborah has a good question for you, Chuck. What percentage of transactions are typically matched, and what percentage is left to manually reconcile? Good way to stump him, Deborah.
So, yeah, that question gets asked a lot, and of course the answer is it depends. But again, what we try to encourage is to get the payment reference a fixed number like the authorization number into the payment reference field. Again, D365 sales order process does that automatically. Our CCA process does that automatically. If you're accepting payments in the payment journal as well as in the sales order. If you have an integration coming from an outside system, typically there's someone writing that integration to create the payment journals, and we try to get in front of that process and make sure that that is put in the payment journal as well. So if you're getting that authorization number put there, the bank always, I mean, the statement, every gateway statement I've seen always has that, you know, some kind of a transaction ID authorization number that is known at credit card payment times. So those typically would get a very, very high match. And of course, we're creating the other two lines. We're the fee line, we're going to always match because we created it. If we create the fee line, if you're getting net charges or if you're getting net deposits, if you're getting the issue we most times see is in the deposit itself. We're getting a calculated deposit from the statement. If there's a timing error, or not timing error, but a timing issue with when your bank kind of cuts off for your deposit versus when your statement gets cut off, that's the most, I mean, that's most times the issue I've seen.
And I know you've brought up Credit Card Advantage. So we have a credit card solution that can help customers process customer payments in an embedded credit card processing solution. They don't have to use our solution for credit card processing to make credit card reconciliation work, correct?
Right. This is not tied to our credit card processing, and as of 10/6 or 7, it is no longer tied to the bank rec processing either. It is a completely separate module.
I'm glad that you reminded me of that. While lots of you on the line are existing customers and our bank reconciliation function is extremely popular in the D365 market, it's important to know that our latest version, we think it's 10.6 or 10.7, as Chuck was saying, the credit card reconciliation function could be used without necessarily using SK Global's bank rec. Of course, we would love for you to use our bank rec module, but you could use the credit card reconciliation feature without using our credit card processing solution or our bank rec module. Someone who works with Microsoft Retail, the retail module, which is mostly credit card payments, are there any implications to using this here?
With the retail feeds, it just, again, depends a lot on how you're getting the payments put in. If you're getting the individual credit card transactions put in and you have that information that you can get into the payment reference, it's kind of the same with the e-commerce feeds. Is how good is your feed as to what payment journals it creating. So if you're creating, payment journals that have the reference numbers in them that's also appearing on the statement, then yes, you can get very good matches. If you don't have good information and you have to, you don't get a reference number in, for instance, and you have to rely on date and amount matches, again, especially with retail, a lot higher volume, you get a lot more kind of duplicate type of duplicate transactions and things like that.
For the customer credit card payments, how do you apply it against the AR balance? What field links the two?
So that's typically part of bringing the payment in itself, not part of the reconciliation. We've so for the same again, typically that's coming in on the credit card feed itself. So if sales order is doing it, it's already linking the invoice and the payment together. If it's a feed coming in from the outside, then it's really that whatever that e-commerce or retail feed is as to how it clears. The recon process is kind of picking up after the payment journal is created, and we would expect the payment journal to be settling the invoices.
And our customers that do use ePay portal or Credit Card Advantage, they're used to the fact that we only support, a certain list of the gateways, usually the top gateways around the world. In this case, we don't necessarily care what gateway that information comes from, where you're showing the data coming in from the spreadsheet. We just need to make sure that the data we are getting meets enough requirements to get you the rec. Am I understanding?
So from your gateway, there's usually options as to what types of reports you can get. And my recommendation is when you're looking at your gateway and what kind of reports you get, is try to get the most, and I use the word data dump, the most data dump type looking report you can get. Kind of the fancier reports that have lots of breaks and totals and things like that are much harder to deal with on an import than something like this, where it's just a kind of a more raw data dump. We do have specific formats for a common European one called Teller. With the Teller format in Europe, the Teller format can bring in the settling currency and in the original transaction currency. And in that particular case, we can match on both and automatically generate the gain or loss transactions as part of the settlement process. So when we set up if you're wondering why, as a US customer or a single currency customer, why you're getting these questions you need to fill out during the initial setup, the gain or loss, it's to support those format that comes in with multiple currency. So I didn't show the Teller format, but as part of when you import things in with dual currencies, you could actually be 100% settled in the transaction currency and matched perfectly, but in the settling currency, the deposit currency, still be off. So your bank rec is technically balanced from a transaction standpoint, but yet your deposit is not balanced. So in that case, we automatically generate the gain or loss transaction.
Okay, we have one of our ePay customers that uses our online payment portal asking, and that you can let me know if we need to research this and answer Sasha offline, but does the approval code import from ePay to match with the bank statement?
We do not do that properly right now. We have a web payment code come in. So there is a payment number out there. We have internally, we have a feature request submitted to try to pull that information out of what we get from ePay to put in.
Okay. So at
Yeah.
some point, so Sasha can have it someday.
Right, right. Right now it imports a web payment, um, yes, a web payment number and not the actual authorization number.
Okay.
Um,
And then I think Will has a question at the very bottom. I'm going to read it out loud, but it's a little long. So
quickly related to the last one, if
uh-huh.
you have our credit card product and you want to use credit card recon, typically you want to make sure this is on origination ID, not the PayFabric ID. The origination ID is the code that's going to come from your gateway. So unless you're going to try to reconcile with a PayFabric report, which you're typically not, you want to make sure you have this set to origination ID. So this is the setting that solves that problem for Credit Card Advantage. We just need to add this same option in our ePay as well.
Got it. Okay. So Will asks for the transaction ID from the acquirer statement. Can that field be matched to a custom D365 field on the ledger, i.e. instead of using the payment reference in the payment journal?
Yeah, so right now our rules, both our import and our rules are kind of geared around those fields. So if we look at our credit card, if I have it up yet, let me just go back to the rules. I guess first on the rules themselves, we're geared to match the payment reference. And then on the import side of the bank, you can map any one of anything you want to one of these two fields, customer reference, bank reference, and it's going to get stored in one of those two fields, but we don't have an ability to pick a custom field to map them to. So on the mapping side, you'll see those two choices on the format to bring it into one of these two fields. And the again, by reference number right now, we're always looking to match it to a payment reference.
Thank you, Chuck. I think we're at the stopping point. I don't see any new questions in. We'll give it about 10 seconds. If anybody has any more questions, obviously you can post them here. You can email us at sales@sksoft.com and we're happy to answer questions. This recording will automatically go out to all of you fine folks who attended the session today. Chuck, I feel like you want to say something.
Yeah, one more quick thing. 10.6.3 is when this became a module. So in earlier versions, this was called like a credit card extension for a few versions. If you have a version that calls this credit card extension and you're going to use credit card reconciliation, I'd recommend getting to something more current than 10.6 of our software. To use the credit card reconciliation module versus the extension. There's just some features in there and it doesn't really convert one to the other if you hop across those versions. So we would like you to, again, credit card extension existed for just a couple versions and now it's called credit card reconciliation. So 10.6.3 is when that switched. If you're on an earlier version, or if you just go to the screen and it says credit card extension, I'd recommend upgrading before embarking down the credit card reconciliation path.
Thank you, sir. Any last words, Chuck?
That was my last one. No.
I don't see any other questions. So thank you everyone for joining us. Again, this was obviously the last of our Thursday webinars in the month of July, but we've got a full slate coming for you in August and September. We've asked before, if you guys have any questions or suggestions or things that you'd like us to present. We created the webinar series based on what our partners and existing customers were asking us to present. So we'll keep listening to you. You keep sharing your feedback with us. And thanks everyone for your time. Thank you, Chuck, for prepping for this and being on here with me.